Hello, 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 it's your man again, Diego Ife, and I'm back with yet another upload. So this is somewhat a spin-off of the Lateness of the Hour series. And this one is Modern Women, Feminism, and the Seven Deadly Sins. So it's more of a think piece, not so much on script as such. Before I dive into that, I hope everyone's having a great day. I appreciate any and everybody who has contributed views to my channel at large, and particularly on this Lateness of the Hour series. So the Seven Deadly Sins. You as the listener, I would love to know what your thoughts are and what comes to mind. I know that this is going to be a contentious topic, and I know that the rubric, or the clickbait as people will call it, is going to have some foaming from the mouth. And I couldn't give a flying fuck. This is a very important message I have to share. Contentious but worthwhile. Anyhow, yeah, I'm going to dive into it. But if I haven't said so, I hope everyone is doing fantastic. Having a good day and week so far. For those in London and parts of the UK, great weather. Long may it continue. But yeah, I've got that pleasantry out of the way. Let's dive into it. So I really want people to reflect on why and how I came up with it, right? And I'm the kind of person, I'm a deep thinker, especially when it comes to the topic and the premise of solutions. The Lateness of the Hour series is very consistent with that worldview and that approach to things. And I'm very, very, very hell-bent on continuing in that vein. This approach here is not a preacher's perspective or anything like that. I'm not necessarily coming from the position of a defender of the faith or anything like that. Granted, the Seven Deadly Sins is ideation coming out from the Catholic Church, and I believe it's a way of do not agree on a core level of morality. And so from those that obviously this is very compelling for me, is that I had to reflect on what the imperative for feminism is/was. Now, this is a, you can argue part of a spoiler alert, but it's worth it. The feminine mystique sense of morality, or the lack thereof. Kind of gauging an idea of one's moral compass. And forgive me, this is a freestyle piece I'm doing here. It's not necessarily on script, so I may chop and change with certain things, so do forgive me, but I will try to make sure that it is as easy to follow as possible. A lot of people have not necessarily agreed firmly on what it is to be feminist. Were lied to, right? Even if the lies felt good and they participated to the best extent to get intentional shortcomings, if you will, so that the younger generations that come and emerge will maybe carefully poised to ensure the primacy of her orgasm, or to put their orgasm above all else. And so this is largely why relationships have gone the way they have. It's the sex revolution that women pushed for. So anyway, feminism is broad. I think people know that you've got your women's rights, which was initially, like I said, almost every man agrees with it in terms of women having the opportunity and the optionality to study well into higher education, to partake in the major arenas of society, and even be captains of industry, and again captains of said arenas. They have the option for that, in addition to having the option to be a housewife and to toe the line of the 1950s traditional setup. However, there's a split in the sense that you have those in that camp, right, that really wanted a bit of changes, some tweaks. And then you have the others that really just wanted to uproot everything. Anarchists, chaotic individuals. And so you tended to find that those were the ones that wanted sexuality to just be anything and everything. They're the women that, because they believed that the primacy of the orgasm was so important, they recruited the gays and any and everybody else that was part of the nascent Alphabet Academy, because they believed it would give them leverage. And if that group of people form a union, even if the idea of patriarchy being a propaganda hit piece, even if that is so, enough pressure put on men, who are obviously straight men, will lead to them relenting and accepting narratives and even assuming guilt instrumental, and it forms the basis of what we see in among modern women, modern womanism and feminism at large as well. So without further ado, the first one is pride / vain glory, right? And that is an excessive belief in one's own abilities, leading to contempt of others and God. Now, that's a major one, because so many things come to mind. And I should add that I'm also going to do one for men as well, right? But right now we're focusing on this. So for me, I think it's remarkable within mainstream society. God became less, what's the word I'm looking for here now? God became less relevant. The idea of God was seen as more of an obstacle, oppressive. Do you understand? And so patriarchy represents oppressors, or a system of oppression that doesn't want them to have infinite orgasms, that doesn't want them to have pleasure, that does not want to make their lives easier based on their own whimsical ideas, wants, and desires. Okay? We know that this is replete across society. With every society, I know that I've covered American, the US state of affairs widely, but listen, this is broad. This cuts across the divide. It's across the Western world, and given that the internet has such a wide reach, you can argue that the entire internet is part of the Western world, even if they are geographically, or rather you have geographical internet users who are outside of the West. I butchered that. Essentially what I'm saying is, although you have people who are internet users outside of the Western world, ideologically, culturally, and pretty much by most measures you can use, they are very much part of the Western world, right? And so this idea that you're able to solve your own issues or problems, or you can answer your own prayers without submitting to this evil patriarch that is God, so to speak, it puts them in a very vulnerable position, because it sounds great, but when it comes down to it, it's not so great, because there's always the politics, there's a political economy, there's parts and conveniences within society that helps one to uphold these excessive beliefs. These beliefs, for what it's worth, are delusional. They are rooted in delusion. So obviously what I've looked at says excessive belief, but I think we can agree that excessive belief and delusion are in the same realm, because at the end of the day, excessive belief requires make-believe. Make-believe is another form of saying delusional. And so when it comes down to contempt, one thing that's become clear from my research, and I'm not going to pull any punches, there's no point. Women ultimately see men at large, and I'm not talking about their siblings and some few exceptions that they'll make, but at large they see men as existing to make their lives easier. This is the reason why if you're someone who does too much in terms of being agreeable with women, then you've carried the agenda of some women, but they don't respect you. But you've proven to be a useful tool in that situation. You might be lucky to get a pat on the head, but it's not going to get much better than that. Then you have your guys who have chosen to be Chad Rowan, so to speak. So had some bad experiences, which has happened to the best of us. And so what now happens is, in the place of this dutiful disposition towards women, which is not good, mind you, they've now replaced it with becoming serial mackers. They've nailed the science of getting with women sexually in terms of like seduction. They've managed it almost to a T. I mean, they've mastered it somewhat. It's probably not got 100% conversion rate, but the effort that they've undertaken to go from being lover boy to let's just say, what's the word I'm looking for here now, cold-blooded nah, I'm just teasing, but no, for him to go from being a lover boy to being the complete opposite, a serial macker who's about his pleasure. You're either on his program or you're not. I'm talking sexually. It's either his way or it's the highway. Even the effort that is undertaken to get to that point is in service indirectly of women, because what you've done is you've now gone from the whole objective, let's say from end to end, was to become more desirable. You have voluntarily put yourself at the service of women. When a man and a woman might have some ideological disagreement, it may not even be like a thing of hate. They just are disagreeing with each other to the point where it's a case of either kill the conversation respectfully or let the conversation die a natural death. Yeah, but there are guys that will come in as I think people call them simps, white knights, and now come in and believe that they are there to intercede, not knowing about the wider agenda. Useful idiots, willful, proud, useful idiots. A lot of them are too quick to assume that role. So anyway, why I use that example to speak about women seeing men as useful tools, right? It's not just because of what I covered in a previous episode about the manual for men, which instructs women to use their sexuality to control men, and that includes using sex to hook the man to marriage, radically reducing the quality and quantity of sex once they cross the threshold and become married, right? Ensuring that he doesn't really have an outlet to enjoy himself. Anything which he derives pleasure from, which does not, let me put it another way, anything that a man derives pleasure from that is not in service to women is essentially unwanted. It is a nuisance and it needs to be dealt with swiftly. And so what now happens in doing that, women become the center of too many men's center of their attraction, the apple of their eye. So my point is, with manipulation, especially media sanctioned manipulation, and then the deceived being the deceivers, and talking about the women that partake in this way of life, right? What need do you have for prayers if you're able to answer your own prayers? Either the system does, or you can manipulate it into place. Why I mention men being useful tools is because you can project that onto God. If you look at, there's various books I've read about this, right? But if you look at man is built in the image of God. Man is a creator, right? He has the spark of life, as Kevin Samuels puts it. And so because of that, a lot of women think that being a man is easy because from their lens, it looks easy, but they just have no idea in many cases. And so the contempt that they feel towards men, I believe they feel towards the idea of God, which is why a lot of them have also become more interested in witchery. You know, your tarot card reading women, you know, the ones who identify as witches, dabble in the diabolical and so on and so forth, right? you'll find that the women that hate men tend to partake in that diabolical matter. If you jettison anything to do with God or order, you now create fertile ground for chaos to ensue. This underlies, this is very consistent with the state of the modern dating mating market. And of course, dating apps they embody that. Oh, they really, really embody that, okay? So the woman in question I'm referring to will not say, I hate God. It will not be as explicit as that, right? But her sentiments about patriarchy, manhood, and its restraints, if you will, makes them in league with, say, for example, the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Many of them identify with Lilith. She's the, I guess, precursor to Lilith. The precursor to Eve in sort of old school Jewish texts. Excuse me. And a lot of women have styled themselves after her. Okay. What I'm essentially saying is the absence of order is what gives rise to it. And so by their behaviors and the fact that even some that speak about having a personal relationship with God is really so that they can live in accordance to their own will, is really the God they've created in their mind. So it's really a relationship with self, and that is consistent with living in an individualistic world, which was deliberately put in place in the 1970s, coming out from the revolution. I will call it, it's been called the sex revolution, but given the involvement of politics, you can call it like a civic revolution, which put the primacy of orgasm at the core of society functioning. And I've belabored that, but thank you for your patience. So the next 7 deadly sin that I'm going to read out is greed or avarice. And it's an excessive desire for material possessions or money. Now, I've covered this in some of my earlier episodes, but whilst women were given many concessions, even to the extent that the Civil Rights Bill, the gains that were made available to Black American men to make up for the effect of Jim Crow and why, how many of them missed out on the GI Bill, that was sequestered and given to women, right? White women predominantly, but Black women received some nominal concessions, shall I say. So the Civil Rights Bill and all the DEI, it happened to be that it was white women that were the largest beneficiaries. But what I'm saying is they received a lot of gains, and nothing was ever enough. So many jobs were cut, again, if we're using the US case, and in the UK as well, many jobs were lost due to sort of structural changes within the economy, right? Deindustrialization. I think you had the Vietnam War, various other conflicts which impeded economic growth. So in effect, if we use the American case, the gains that were accrued by men coming out from World War II, say the 40s and 50s, and early part of the 60s, which made the 60s prosperous, was obviously killed in the 70s, right? Or at least it was severely eroded, let me just say that much. And so in many ways, just as an aside, what we knew as the 90s was supposed to happen in the 70s, okay? Just to let you know. So with this whole thing of greed, right? Men still remained, as much as women wanted men to adapt to new or refined, did I say refined? No. New and revised gender roles. They wanted men to still uphold the traditional side of things. And that means that, for example, there's many women that have missed out on meaningful, when I say meaningful relationships, I'm talking about whether it's the tingles, all of that stuff. They could have got almost total package, but it was greed that stopped them. Greed can manifest itself in going for food dates with men, and you have no intention of obviously having a relationship of sorts with them, right? But will lie and give the impression, at the very least use plausible deniability to secure the date. I mean, joke might be on the guy, but eventually you run out of guys to trick with and then just left with regrets and sorrow eventually. But anyway, so an excessive desire, okay? Notice as well that as social media has been social mediating in the last few years, and you've had a proliferation in Instagram users and Instagram models and flying out women and all that kind of stuff, right? The core of what has made a lot of women debase themselves, I mean, OnlyFans is probably a very strong embodiment of that, is the desire for money, material possessions. Many women have found themselves in harm's way, not because of need, but because of greed. Okay? Many men have been relegated, or they have been consigned to how much they have in their pockets at a given point in time. That's not including their earning potential, mind you, which is actually objectively set and is very clear. It's not dating potential per se. Like, his situation is imminently going to change because of the work that he's put in. Hopping around to get the man that has the most money, hitting, hoping, hopping, and never really actually securing is what awaits many women who chose to take that path. Tell the truth, shame the devil. So I think we're cool with what greed looks like. Envy. This is an interesting one. Sadness or resentment, that's another's good fortune or possessions. So because society became more vain, right, and the number of items on the market, diverse range of products that can help beautify women and make them stand out more to men, right? And I guess other women that like women, I suppose. What it has done is where people aren't able to beautify themselves the way others can or have been able to, for whatever reason, they start to feel jealous. If there is some idea of the woman trying to compete with the man, you know, because she thinks that anything a man can do, a woman can do just as good or better, but she finds out that that's make-believe and the reality is rather different, to say the least. This can give rise to jealousy, or should I say resentment rather, sadness or resentment that you're not a man and you can't do man stuff. So it becomes this vain form of phallic envy. It is phallus-induced, and it's the reason why you might find that some wear dildos, because it's the next best thing. I know, see, I'm being a bit lighthearted in saying that, but a lot of the thoughts that come in our minds is informed by the state of our spirit. I'm just keeping it real, okay? I mean, look, there's so many examples that come to mind. A lot of us know, it's widely accepted among men and women, that women want what other women want. If a guy, for instance, knows 9 women, they're acquaintances, he gets on with them, they're not friends, they, and at least 2 of those 9 find him attractive, and all he has to say is, yes, I'm down, and it's gonna go, everything is gonna fall in line, yeah. It won't just be those 2 women that are going to have a good time, so to speak. All 9 of them are gonna want some. And if it's not possible, they're gonna want a guy that is very much like that guy that they were all interested in. Again, it's consistent with women want what other women want, okay? So I think I've covered that sufficiently. Lust, oh boy. Society has been transformed, right, by making the primacy of the woman's orgasm morally legitimate. It has been transformed fundamentally. When people talk about the reduced birth rates, the increase in like the public's debt profile, student loan debt, lack of opportunities, economically, the need to increase them, so on and so forth. A lot of this is built around an economy, which has catered towards accommodating female lust. So much so that propaganda accusing men of being patriarchs because they did not want to be with either women who are very free with it, so to speak, or just expect a certain way of doing things. They're shamed. We look at the market for sex toys. We look at the market for contraception. Sex toys is a very, very big part of it because that market proliferates. Whether you're looking at butt plugs, whether you're looking at bullets, whether you're looking at roses, there's so many. I'm just listing off the top of my head because there's enough women that have gone on about these things ad nauseum. You've got, for example, and I might be a bit of a hypocrite because I am recording some erotica books, but that's an aside. They love romance novels. Especially if it's got an erotic side, they love erotica. all the implements to satisfy their lusts, whether it's rubbing up on pillows, I know I'm being a bit graphic here, and a conveyor belt of possibilities on dating apps. Their lust can be really, I can't say fulfilled entirely, but they can really satisfy that appetite, that abundant appetite, sexually speaking. Shaming men sexually as well. Sometimes there's men who have said they felt under pressure. They have felt under pressure to kowtow to women shaming them into sex. A man might not be in the mood. Something might be up, but you chip away at his manhood and you make him feel like he's inadequate because he doesn't want to have sex or he's not able to mentally in that moment. It could be for a host of reasons. It might have been slow roast emasculation and thereby the killing of his sex drive over time. That's one potential possibility. There's various others, but you'll find situations where men are shamed sexually. And the only way that could even happen in the first place was because society decided to jettison the emblems of what it is to become a man and actualize manhood. And in its place, it literally beat men over the head with this idea of orgasm primacy and it being the most morally legitimate aspects of society. Things changed. Oh boy, things did change indeed. It's still not enough. Still not enough. There's always going to be extra desire, more, right? This is not to say that men do not have their own lusts and their own imaginations, but we know that society, the markets, and much of it is really set up to satisfy female lust. Gluttony. I don't even need to belabor this one. I can sum it up in 2 words. Body positivity. Body positivity is the embodiment of that. And for me, it's very pernicious because I noticed from probably going back to like 2016 or thereabouts, I started to see memes of lean guys that are very lean, gym rats, so on and so forth. One of them would be with this sizable woman, very sizable, and she wants to go on the skating board. And you can clearly see that that's not a good idea, but beyond the skating board, the idea of it was to socialize men to believe that that's the kind of woman that they should be, getting down with. And that if you want a woman that is more consistent with what you are and who you are in terms of like her physique, being slimmer, healthier, then it's a bad thing. So they've tried to make gluttony morally legitimate and they've had to guilt men into accepting it. And again, the major hook, the biggest hook is making sure that the primacy of the orgasm is most important. Don't worry, we're going to really dissect that over time. Oh my. By the time we're done, there'll be no mysteries. No. No mysteries. Okay? So we know that diabetes has increased. We know that morbid obesity has increased. We know that there are many different societies that are dying from preventable deaths based on dietary habits. I can go on, but I did say I don't need to belabor it. Body positivity is easiest embodiment of gluttony as a 7 deadly sin. Wrath, uncontrolled rage or violent desire for revenge. I mentioned earlier about the appeal of witchcraft that many women have felt sway from. There are women who gladly and with chest identify as white witches or good witches. And now the problem with that, and it goes back to pride, because we don't have a universal morality or what have you, a white witch, frankly speaking, or a good witch is based on her say-so. Because of whether it's greed, gluttony or whatever, there could be an instance where there's this uncontrolled rage for no real major reason. The witchcraft aspects of it, because one believes they're a good person, is subjective. Someone might do something which is quite trivial and you're gonna want to go ham on that person. You want to really take it to them when what happened wasn't even anywhere near as bad as you made out. You might be having a bad day, you get into a certain situation which again was avoidable. Might not even happen to end dramatically, but still there's that desire for uncontrolled rage or violent desire for revenge. Certain men have found that they've had tires slashed, their windows bust up, their clothes cut, their woman or ex-woman, whatever it's the case is, woman connected to them using their car as a weapon. These are signs of it. The whole misandry, men ain't shit, men are scum, abort male babies, all this kind of stuff. I know that there was definitely a lot of politicking and propaganda that pre-Obama wasn't what it was, but over the course of the Obama years and coming out from it, these women have received moral legitimacy to be angry at each other and also men. Men are their problem. But yet, men are the most important thing to them. What a conflicted position to hold, eh? But I hope I've given a decent insight into what wrath/anger is. Sloth, and that's a spiritual and physical apathy, indifference, lacking diligence, or neglecting one's responsibilities. We know this is a big one. Accountability. So many ideas come to mind when it comes down to accountability, because I think that's a big part of sloth. You have, for example, this might apply in, say, a country like Nigeria. You have women who try to hold men more accountable in terms of meeting their needs than their earthly dads. That arguably is unforgivable, especially if it is done, in a contemptuous setting, which it almost always is. So that is an example of being slothful. For instance, the idea, if we're going to keep the theme of the primacy of orgasm, making your male partner, or for the lack of a better expression, responsible for your orgasm, is a form of sloth. Not wanting to really, truly have when I say a proper relationship with God, one which you actually embody some values that are maybe Christian leaning or just some form of orderliness, right? The lack of wanting that, seeking it out, or trying to subsume it into your life is a neglect of responsibilities. You look at, for example, some women who choose to have children as a way to extract resources. Not only is that greed, but it is also neglecting one's duties and responsibilities. We complain a lot about the tanked birth rate, certain social issues, and so on and so forth. And that is because, you can make this as a wider societal point of neglecting one's responsibilities. But listen, feminism sought to revise the social contract between men and women, where the benefits became lopsided in favor of women and the losses, or the not so pleasant side of things, basically became the default for men to be responsible for. But even under such unfair conditions, ultimately, this whole idea of men are patriarchs is based on lies. It's literally just that women have never been too enamored with the idea of traditional wife roles. And the only time, if we're using Western world situation like America, UK, etc., where they've truly been able to fall under it is when there are precarious times, when shit is hitting the fan or is likely to hit the fan. When they feel unsafe and uncovered, that's when marriage seems to be very appealing. But when things are more prosperous, you don't want the shackles. You want to live in accordance to your own will. This was never going to really end well, frankly speaking. I remember as a kid seeing various instances of anarchy. When I say anarchy, I'd see TV programs or I'd see iconography that would have those anarchy signs that you see that were appropriated during like your 60s revolution, the hippie movement, for example, and free sex and all that kind of stuff. You see that, and in your mind, at least in my mind anyway, anarchy is like a symbol. It's some kind of man or woman holding some kind of like placard and say, "Way, anarchy, anarchy." But it was happening and unfolding in plain sight in my life. And so, of course, because of this incessant focus on mating and dating, to be honest, it's kind of why we exist. It's always going to be, it's always going to be one of those things, I suppose. Anyway, I think I've said a bit. Forgive me if that last thought was not fully finished. It was incoherent, to use a word. But yeah, I hope that I've sufficiently covered the 7 deadly sins, and I will be doing more hit pieces, not propaganda, actually exposing propaganda. I'll be doing more pieces in relation to this, but I must emphasize this here is not a part 7 or 8. It's just a think piece I had when I was thinking the other day, and I said to myself that this is tricky. If you want to talk about accountability, it takes 2 to tango. So it's all good and well saying men are not doing this, that, and the other, and there may well be cases for that, for sure, but it's quite another thing to make out as if they are the only part of society, the only sub-demographic that has to do the heavy lifting and heavy pulling. Society was shifted in order to accommodate modern womanism, feminism, so on and so forth, but women have not acknowledged it because, again, if you go back to the 2nd deadly sin of greed, nothing is ever enough. promise you, even with the good intentions that I have and other people that are speaking, it will never be enough. One thing which I think I was speaking to a friend of mine the other day, and she said that those that don't want to hear may have to feel, or those that refuse to hear must feel. And it really appears that the fallout from feminism is going to be one where many are going to have to feel. And this isn't solely men and women, but I'm addressing the female women case here. It definitely appears to be one of those instances where, yeah, it's going to have to feel. And just as a heads up to who this might apply to or resonate with, what you're after, in order to rationalize this and move forward and look at solutions and look on the positive side of things, you're going to have to accept the 5 stages of grief. And let's quickly run through them just very quickly. I do want to wrap this up. It's been going on for a minute. Hopefully I've kept your attention thus far. So, the 5 stages of grief, was developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and it's a model for understanding the emotional reactions to loss, including death, right? And death can be metaphorical, because obviously feminism, as we know it, is dying an inevitable death. These stages are denial or denialism, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Very quickly, we're going to run through it. Denialism. The denial that patriarchy is a myth and that society has not been radically shifted and revolutionized to accommodate the primacy of the orgasm is not going to help anyone. It's not going to help us men. It's not going to help women. It's not going to help the kids, boys and girls. It does not help us to pretend and practice denialism. I, for one, and various other people have quit practicing denialism. As an aside, it's demonic. That I will say. But we're not going to practice denialism. Moving on. Anger. Accepting that one has been lied to and has also been doing the lying. To use Sue Ellen Browder, being concomitantly the deceived and the deceiver. The anger that comes from that is, I empathize, because look, you can imagine, embracing feminist ideas and the idea that if it feels good, it must be good. If it feels right, it must be right. You might get a load of benefits to begin with, but in the long run, it's not going to work out. So once you strip back the denialism and you have to ask yourself, now what? It's going to be followed by anger. It stands to reason, because you're now realizing that there's a trade-off and you're not liking the other side of the trade-off. So anyway, if you're not able to trigger anybody, or you don't necessarily do anything dramatically self-destructive, you may now start to bargain and ask yourself, okay, I'm gradually coming around to the idea that the way this was set up has not worked. It's been an unmitigated failure. In any case, is there some redemptive characteristic? Is there a way that things can be improved, whether that is on an individual level or structurally? So you now start thinking, okay, well, I guess we are difficult as women. But what about the men? So that is a form of like bargaining. Then you have the depression. When you realize that, for example, the internet is replete with videos as to why men aren't approaching women anymore, blah, 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 blah. When you realize that you're no longer in control of men and you cannot use your sexuality or any other kind of implement structurally or otherwise, that sense of helplessness will give rise to some form of sadness. You feel overwhelmed. There's a loss. And I'm not gonna, this I don't empathize with because it's demonic in my opinion, but you've lost the levers to control men using sexuality or shaming tactics or God knows what else, right? And so that, I've got nowhere else to go, that kind of sentiment the woman might find envelops her. And then acceptance. You've gone through the full stages and you recognize that you're not a victim. I mean, at the very least, you're a victim and victimizer. So it cancels out the being a victim aspect of it. You're back to square one, I suppose. Ground zero is that you fucked up. You royally shafted yourself. You took the imagination to self-destruct, and you also willed on others to do so, right? Accountability does not mean that you're going to literally shrivel up and, like a prune and just like wither away, or you're going to turn to a pillar of salt or stone or whatever. No. In fact, if anything, accountability is the thing that is actually going to help you get redemption. There are some women who have not been the best of people, right? But they will buy into the tools that are available to become better people and redeem their circumstances, right? I can only wish those women well, because at least they've identified, they've looked at the 7 deadly sins, they've looked at the 5 stages of grief, and they have said, you know what? I want different. Those women are winners. That's a winner's mindset. That's accountability. And that there is where the redemption, the positivity, the hope, the blueprint comes from for better. Now, I say everything I've said in good faith. There has been some passion. There has been some profanity. But sometimes when it comes to the F-bombs and everything else, it helps the message to stick. And that's what we want. And I am committed to making sure that I am as fair as possible with these uploads, especially when it comes down to what I've just covered. I've got critiques for both genders. And like I said, part of this I've also introspected. So it's not like, I think when it comes down to the fuckery in society, it's a joint enterprise. None of us are innocent. So this model of the 7 deadly sins and the 5 stages of grief is not just something I'm doing for women, I'm doing it for men. I'm also going to be doing it on a societal level. So whether you want to look at it on a government level, corporate, you name it, whichever measure you want to use, I'm going to do it. Have a bit of fun with it, but ultimately I want to educate and entertain. Please feel free to share your comments, your thoughts. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and share this content with people you think it may resonate with. Listen, it's been real. It's been a pleasure expressing what I have. It's taken a minute. We're crossing the 50-minute mark in a moment, but I just felt the strong sense of obligation to record this. In fact, I was actually doing some other work. I was actually doing work, but my spirit said to put that down to one side and take care of this. And you know something? I'm very happy that I obeyed the call. I really do hope that I've actually provided value to as many people as possible. I hope the message resonates over and above any contention on my delivery. Take care, everybody. And until next time.